Good afternoon and welcome to Willow's Green Permaculture. My name is Stephen Dixon, and today it's May 11th, and I would like to take you into the garden to show you what's going on and to talk to you about the changing years, the changing weather, the changing seasons, and to show you how you can become your own expert, your own teacher at becoming the best gardener that there is by allowing nature to show you, by allowing nature to teach you, by allowing nature to guide you, and then you become the expert of wherever it is you're working on the land. You don't need me, you don't need guides, you don't need books, you don't need videos, you don't need courses, you don't need my videos. All you need is yourself, the garden you're working in, nature, your observational skills, and you can become your own expert, your own guide. So if this is something you're interested in, then let's get started. Now, I don't want you to stop watching my videos. I hope you watch them because you enjoy them. It's sort of a community that you're a part of, an essential part of. It's a sharing of knowledge, a sharing of ideas. What this is all about is undoing all that dependency, because nature is the best teacher. Nature is perfect. And just like anything else in life, nature is changing. And it's important not to always try and do things in the same way all the time. And that's why sometimes guides can lead you astray, because even if it comes from a similar region than yours, similar, let's say, climate zone, because every single garden is different. Just like every single person is different, or if you have pets, different pets, maybe you have several dogs or cats, you can see that their personalities are different, they behave differently. Well, nature is just one big conglomeration of billions upon billions upon billions of life forms. And so nature has its behaviors as well. Nature, just like animals and just like other people, nature has its moods as well. Why? Because we're not talking about some inanimate thing that has moods. No, we're talking about all the living things out there that have their moods, depending on things like the weather patterns, how long the winter was, how short it was, how much snow we got, how much rain we got, and all the rest, including the interactions between we as people with nature and the animals with nature and so on, and with your gardens, etc. And so things can change. Things can be very different within the same region. Things can be very different within the same garden. You have what's called a microclimates, and I'm going to show you that here, where some parts of the garden or some gardens here are much more further along than others because of the conditions. And it's those conditions that are the key to you becoming your own expert, to you becoming your own guide, because over time you observe those conditions, the conditions of the changing weather patterns on the same day, let's say on the same date, but in different years. You'll notice all the different conditions in your different areas of your garden, and then maybe if you have more than one garden in your different gardens, you observe those and you take them down, you try and remember them. I'm someone, I forget. I do things and I forget. I do and I forget. I do and I forget. I do and I forget. And so it's important to me to take notes sometime, to take some time to take notes, because that helps me remember. In our first 3-4 years here, I took notes heavily. And so they're a real guide. They help me. But knowing that things can, again, be different. And this spring, it's a real typical example. This spring, I haven't seen a spring like this since 2020, which was our first spring here. It's about the same weather as we got then. Very cool spring. It's May 11th today, and it's cool. You can see I'm wearing a jacket, I'm wearing a shirt, and a sweater under the shirt, and the garden is moving along a lot more slowly. And so I've had to slow things down, because I generally, in the past, because I tend to be impatient and want to see things grow, etc., that I've often started things too early, let's say indoors. And if you start things too early indoors, it just becomes a bit of a burden, because your plants get too big, and I'll show you that later. Your plants get too big, and you don't know where to put them anymore, and they fall over and all the rest of it. And so, you know, because there's always a question of space. We don't have limitless amounts of let's say indoor space or warmed heated space. Our greenhouse isn't heated, so our peppers and our loofahs are still inside the house, because it's still been too cold in the greenhouse for them. You know, because peppers and loofahs do not like temperatures in the single digits Celsius, which is probably what, in the high 40s, you know. And for the last few weeks it's been going down to, well, outdoors it's been going down to freezing, 1 degree, 2 degrees Celsius. And in the greenhouse, that means it's been going down to, let's say, 3 or 4 or 5 degrees Celsius. We're talking high 40s. And that's just too cold for peppers and loofahs. If they spend too much time with those temperatures, like several hours every night, their growing is going to sort of shut down, slow down. They're going to say, oh, this is like, they're going to become, you might say, depressed, talking about moods. And they may not grow as well during the season. You know, of course, you don't want to baby your plants either. You don't want to, you know, we don't use fertilizer or anything like that, because we don't want to baby our plants, especially the ones, you know, that we start indoors. You know, when we bring them outdoors, we want the garden to be the, wow, you know, let's say, wow, this is a great move. You want the move outdoors to be a move to a better place rather than a move from a better place. And so, yeah, this season's been cool, and so I've had to slow things down. There are things I haven't even started yet. I haven't started my watermelons yet. I haven't started my whole bunch of stuff that I only just started all my grains about a week ago, I think it was. And often there's a video I re-uploaded this past week about sorghum, and you see me transplanting my sorghum like in mid-May, let's say toward around the 20th of May, something like that. And by the way, about those re-uploaded videos, this is an important aside. Recently, I have been re-uploading older videos so that they can be dubbed in many languages, because they weren't dubbed, or maybe they're only dubbed into a couple languages. However, I like to be transparent, and I always put it in the description and in the pinned comment and in the community post that it's a re-uploaded video to allow for the multilingual dubbing. And so some of the videos that I've uploaded, they show my garden a lot further along than it is right now. And it's because I've basically wanted to put them there so that people can see what's going on, or what was going on ahead of time, to give you ideas. Because in the past, I've kind of always, you know, recorded my stuff and while it's going on. And so when, after all the editing and preparing and publishing and all the rest of it, well, it's a week later than when I filmed it. And so it's it's always been a little bit late. So it's been nice to get some stuff out early. You know, even me looking at these older videos again, it reminds me of stuff, and I remember stuff, and I sometimes learn stuff again, because things, like I said, I forget. Anyway, just in case you were wondering about that, checking my notes is because there's a lot of stuff that I want to say in this video today. Before I get into showing you everything, you know, it's a little bit about letting go of control and allowing nature to show you what you can do. Because if you try and do the same thing every time, every year, exactly the same way, well, that's a little bit, you know, trying to over control things. And sometimes, you know, in the past, I've tried to force things, let's say, and not only in the garden, in my life, I've tried to force things that I really wanted to have happen, and I force them, even though, let's say they, you know, is something that maybe naturally wouldn't have happened, wouldn't have come about, and sometimes it leads to bad results. You know, sometimes some of our biggest regrets are things that we kind of forced, we kind of pushed too much. You know, you got to find that balance. In life, you got to find that balance, and in gardening, you got to find that balance. Gardening is a great metaphor for life. You know, and there were some great people in world history who used gardening as a metaphor all the time. I think maybe you know what I'm talking about. Anyway, you know, and there's another video that'll be coming up at some point, and called that I'm going to call something like what the garden taught me about faith, but that'll be for another video. You know, I look at some gardening sites where, you know, they're known as, let's say, true masters of gardening, let's say, and they're using methods that have been popular over the last several decades. But, you know, we're talking about over-controlling methods that don't necessarily let plants develop naturally. You know, and I'm not just talking about pesticides and chemical fertilizers and all the rest of it. Sometimes you just got to let plants live and do their thing, because they're living beings just like us. I mean, we talk a lot about factory farms and seeing chickens or cattle in overcrowded conditions. To me, that's like slavery. These are living beings, and their lives must be miserable. And sometimes I see that with plants as well. I mean, you might think I'm a little crazy, but sometimes I think that we've enslaved plants as well, and let's say forcing them to do things that they shouldn't, etc. And whereas if you just let them be and let them grow and let them do what they want to do and let them change how they want to change, you'll end up seeing that they're going to be a lot better for you, and you're going to have a lot more enjoyment, and it's just going to be so much more joyful, because you're sharing your life with all of these living beings. You're sharing your life with countless thousands or millions of living beings. And I'm not just talking about other people and animals and insects and so on. I'm talking about the plants. I'm talking about the fungi. I'm talking about the bacteria, everything. They're all there for a reason, and we're all here together. So you see, basing your gardening on your own observations will help you realize that sometimes guides that, let's say, might take your region and your particular region and say, okay, all I need to know is your average last frost date, and I can tell you what when you should plant, the exact date you should plant each and every plant, and so on. But the thing is, you have to be careful about that. For example, here where I live, all of the data for the weather that's been collected over decades and decades is collected in a place that's much more close to Lake Ontario than we are, and a much warmer, as far as I'm concerned, a much warmer climate, at least half a climate zone to a full climate zone warmer than we are. And yet that's what, because that's where the weather tower is, or whatever, the monitoring tower, then that's what's used. So, whenever I'm checking the weather, I'm always sort of checking out another one that isn't in our official region, let's say, but it seems to be more accurate for me. But I'm not going to take that region either and use it in a guide, because it's going to give me skewed dates as well. Every single garden is different. I never plant on the same day every year, because it's different every year. They'll be similar. This year's been very different, much more similar to our first year. And often it's going to be your plants themselves, especially your perennial ones, that are going to give you the clues that you need to know the behavior of the weather, the behavior of the garden for the year, or at least for that part of the season. For example, there are lots of sayings about, when the rhubarb is up, such and such a thing you can put in the garden. When the forsythia is up, such and such a thing you can plant. When the garlic is up, etc. I don't know all those by heart. When the dandelions are up, then you could do a certain thing in your garden. Things are ready, and so on. And so here we have, for example, our garlic. We plant it in the fall, so obviously it tells us what's going on when it comes up. We have our rhubarb, we have our sorrel, and then we have our biennial plants like the, let's say, the parsley and so on, chicory, and then the other perennials like our comfrey, our yarrow, and so many others. And the trees, the fruit trees, etc., they all tell us what's going on, those perennial ones. And what's interesting is, even plants that aren't from around here. I've spoken to you about my copal tree. You know, it's from Oaxaca, Mexico. And so it's in a completely different climate. Obviously, it stays indoors most of the year, but I put it outside after all danger of frost is finished, which is usually about the second week of June, and then I bring it back in when dangers of frost start again in the fall, usually mid to late September. I think last year I didn't take it in until October, which was kind of nice. But that copal knows it's very different here. It's a deciduous tree from a tropical region. You know, as a Canadian, I had no idea that there were deciduous trees that lost all their leaves for half the year in the tropics, or for several months in the tropics. But I learned that when I lived in Oaxaca, Mexico, because Oaxaca, Mexico has a pretty severe, completely dry season, sometimes not a drop of rain from let's say the beginning of November until mid-April. So it kind of coincides with our winter here, and those are also the coolest months in Oaxaca. And so the trees lose all their leaves. Some trees lose all their leaves. Roughly at the same time as they lose all their leaves here, a little bit later. And they start to get them back, obviously, a little bit earlier, sort of in advance of the rains, let's say, when they feel the weather's warming up, I guess. So my copal tree would probably lose its leaves probably not until December. Unless a colony of ants came along and stripped of its leaves to let it rest a little sooner, which is what they do sometimes, and then they grow mushrooms for them to eat, and the mycelia probably help the copal as well. And then the leaves start to come back maybe late February, beginning of March, but not here. So here that copal tree is indoors all the time. But what it does, and I'll show you, it puts out 2 or 3 leaves starting in sometime in March. Just 2 or 3 leaves out of the thousands or hundreds that it could put out. And they're usually fairly large too, much larger than what it would normally put out. And I have a feeling those leaves are like they're to test the waters. Okay, you know, because that tree knows that it's somewhere other than what it's used to, and so it doesn't want to waste its energy. So it puts those leaves out, and when those leaves detect that the temperature's right and let's say the sun's radiation is sufficient, that's when it'll put out the rest. And of course it doesn't do that until I put it outside. You know, and from my last week's video I talked about putting the aloe outside so it grows well, so it grows explosively. Well, same thing with the copal. It won't even put any of its regular leaves out, apart from those 2 or 3, until it's outside. And then it takes a bit of time, takes a few days, maybe a week, and then you start to see the little leaves starting to come out. You know, and so clearly if I left that copal inside all year, it wouldn't survive, even if it got a lot of sun, because it just probably wouldn't be enough sun indoors. Because it wouldn't, you know, unless we're talking about one of those like greenhouses, you know, that are heated and like they're open in the top and so on. You know, like we don't have one of those. Well, I mean, we have a greenhouse, it's not heated, but indoors, you know, we've got the ceilings. And so it's never going to get that overhead light. And so nature's intelligent. Animals are intelligent, plants are intelligent. You know, it goes way beyond instinct. Plants respond to your interactions with them. They respond to music. Anyway, that's a whole other story. One tool that can help you with the changing years and the changing weather patterns is a simple garden thermometer. Don't think I paid too much for this. It's very simple technology. It's just a thermometer, sort of like a kitchen thermometer that you stick into a piece of meat or something like that, but you stick it into the soil. Very useful because, you know, in my recent video about working with seeds and sowing stuff, but transplanting as well, soil temperature counts. course, you can mitigate soil temperature with mulch and all the rest of it. But it's good to have a thermometer, because sometimes it's just a complete waste of time to sow things. And you could end up, like, for example, if you sow beans too early, they could end up rotting in the soil. You know, I've talked to you before in videos before about beans that I've overwintered outside, like the beans hanging off of the vine, and they've survived all winter. Why? Because they stayed dry. But as soon as that bean is in the soil and gets moist, and so starts to do the process of germinating, well, cold temperatures will kill it, and it'll just rot. Whereas while it's dry, that's not a problem. So, and same goes with other seeds. That can be way too early to sow them. So, you know, one of these is a good investment. Save you time. Now, what we're going to do is I'm going to show you what's going on in the garden, and you're going to see that it's not very far along, but not to worry. Between now and the solstice, June 21st, it's going to be explosive. There's going to be a lot of explosive growth. And there's going to be stuff that's not even going to be transplanted in until close to that date. But that's okay. So let's have a look and see what's going on. Rhubarb is one of those indicator plants that the conditions are ready to do certain things, and our rhubarb is quite up. It's very nice. I talked about the garlic. Our over 500 garlic bulbs are all growing, which is really nice. And other stuff around it. There's some mullein over there. I don't know if I'm going to keep that one in particular. We'll see, because they get pretty massive. But right here beside the garlic, it's our potato patch. They're not up yet. Sometimes they do start to be up in mid-May, but not this year. In case you're wondering, I plant my potatoes right after harvesting them. I choose a few, leave them in the ground, and then mulch heavily. We also have yarrow, as you can see right here, up everywhere, which is really nice. Our catnip is up everywhere as well, and I love this plant because I like to rub myself down with it. Not in this season though. I mean, it's still a little cool anyways, but it's a good insect repellent, and it's a good tick repellent. And actually it's tick season right now, but I'm well covered, and I'm going to be collecting lots and lots and lots of catnip seed this year, because I want to plant it everywhere. I've already got, I don't know how many bunches of catnip growing all over the place, probably at least 20 or more, but I'd like some more. And so I'm going to be letting it flower. I always let it flower anyways, and I'm going to be collecting those seeds. This catnip in particular is right by our onion and carrots in our main garden, which are just starting to come up. You can see them here. Here are the onions, and there are the carrots between the onions. They're just barely coming up, as you can see. Carrots and onions go really well together because neither is too competitive. And actually, let me show you something. In this carrot and onion area, we do have a weed that comes up every year. That's really hard to control, but I control it by eating it. And it's this plant right here. This is sow thistle. I'm not going to eat it right here because the root is full of dirt, and it's this root section which is really good. But I eat the whole thing, the leaves and the root. All the thistles are edible, and they're really nice. Even the prickly ones, you can peel those, peel the stems and eat inside the stems. You see, because some plants have, let's say, oxalic acid as their defense, like sorrel, like spinach. They have oxalic acid in them, and so you can't eat too much of that stuff because it fixes itself to the calcium in your body, and it could give you let's say what they call bladder stones or something like that. But thistles don't have any of that oxalic acid. They're just pure delicious. And so they, the prickly thistles, their defense is the prickliness, because if they didn't have those prickliness, then the animals would be eating them down to the ground all the time. And so sow thistle is another. It's in the, it's I don't know if it's in the same family as the prickly thistles, but anyway, it's called thistle. And the sow thistle because I think the pigs love it. But it's delicious. This tastes like a bean sprout. So this time of year, as my onions and carrots are coming up, I'm picking the sow thistle and bringing it inside. I'll pick a whole bowl full, and we'll add it to our salad, and it's really, really delicious. Something else that comes up in with our onions are wild raspberries, and we have that along our contour right behind here, but I don't want it in the garden. However, raspberries can tend to be aggressive, and so I will also pick these raspberry sprouts, and the leaves are really, really healthy in a tea. Very good for you. I don't know what the properties are. I just know it's really, really good for you. The burdock is up as well in its second year, the year it's going to go to seed. This is a perfect time when it's just starting to grow in its second year, so that you know where it is. I could harvest the root of this. It's a bit of work harvesting the root, and to be honest, I don't know how to prepare burdock root to eat, and I don't know if the Canadian burdock is this Arctium lapa, I think it's called in Latin. I don't know if this is really as edible as the Japanese burdock is. Anyway, I like to have the burdock in the garden in case I touch stinging nettle or I get a bee sting or whatever. Then I'll use the burdock to take away the sting. Curly dock does it as well, and so does plantain, Plantago major, and jewelweed usually does it as well. And behind the burdock, we have some parsley coming up in its second year. I love it when the parsley survives the winter and comes up in a second year, because then I can collect the seeds. I always plant new parsley in the spring, so that in its second year, it eventually gives us seed. I just like to be able to have our own seeds, which is really nice. And so we're going to get a whole bunch of seeds from these parsleys. But in the meantime, we're going to be able to eat a lot of parsley. This time of spring, we've already eaten some. And then later in the summer, when these go to seed and to go to flower and go to seed, well, we'll be getting parsley from the plants that are growing in the greenhouse right now. So from the parsley and the burdock, let's go to the row of lettuce and carrots along here. These carrots are further along. Why? Because I planted them in the greenhouse and transplanted them here. These carrots are here more to be companion plants for the tomatoes because they love them. Whereas over here with the onions, those carrots were direct sown. Problem with direct sowing carrots though is you really got to keep on top of the weeds, which is a lot of work with the sow thistle here. However, I'm glad that it's delicious and I can eat it. So these carrots and this lettuce, they're going to be companion plants for the tomatoes that are going to be eventually, there'll be 2 rows of tomatoes here, one there and one there. The tomatoes are just starting in the greenhouse right now, much later than usual as well. I'll probably not be transplanting them until June 5th or 6th, maybe even later. But that's okay. That's still plenty of time to get us tomatoes. And so carrots love tomatoes, and the lettuce, as I've said in previous videos, when it's time to harvest, I don't pull the plant up. I just harvest the head, let's say, or a bunch of leaves, and make sure the roots stay in place, because eventually it will grow real tall, go to flower, go to seed, and the spike is going to be almost as tall as the tomato plants and help to keep those tomatoes standing. So you can see all the carrots over there and lettuce, and all the carrots over here in the lettuce. And actually, another one I like to plant with tomatoes, which is further in the back, away from the carrots, is dill. So we've got a bit of dill here. After I ran out of carrot plants, I started putting in the dill plants. And they're going to grow also as tall as the tomatoes when they flower and go to seed, and will help those tomatoes keep standing. Of course, the dandelions are all up, and I've been eating tons of it. It is so delicious. I can't believe that for years and years and years I didn't eat dandelion. It's so good, especially this time of year when there's not a whole lot of other stuff. That stand right there is just ready to cut and bring inside. This is one of 2 cabbage plants that survived the winter. I'm so happy because it's going to go to flower, and I'm going to be able to get cabbage seeds from it. This is some just regular green cabbage, sort of round-headed green cabbage. I'll be very glad if I can get some viable seed from this cabbage. Inside the cabbage, you might see a lot of creeping Charlie. We've got it everywhere. It's not very difficult to control though, which is good, especially when there's mulch, because when I pull away the mulch, the creeping Charlie comes with it. And also, creeping Charlie is edible. It's in the mint family. Tastes a bit like mint. So I'll often harvest some and bring it inside, put it in our salads. And speaking about rolling mulch aside, well, look here, look at this big pile of mulch. Much higher than behind it. It's because all of these leaves were on top of this section of the garden just a few days ago. And often you've asked me, well, what do I do with all those leaves in the spring? Well, what I do is I simply move them off the area where they were being used. At the moment, all I did was pile it up right beside. But if I need, I can take a whole bunch of these leaves and bring them elsewhere where I need mulch. And eventually they all get used. Last fall, I didn't get as many leaves as I hoped. And so I've got some areas, like the area on the tomatoes that you saw a little bit earlier, didn't have too much mulch on it. And the mulch really helps the weeds down while I'm waiting to transplant stuff. Because, you know, waiting until sometimes the first week of June, a lot of weeds can grow in the meantime, and it creates a lot of work, and the leaves save me that work. You know, I could take all these leaves and I could just throw them on top of all this creeping Charlie. And then what happens is the creeping Charlie has to work twice as hard to get through the leaves. And then when I pull the leaves off, the creeping Charlie roots come with them. And then I'll shake the leaves off, and I'll take that creeping Charlie along with its roots, and I'll go throw it somewhere where I'm building the soil, where there's no soil, like on one of my chinampas where it's just branches and tree trunks and so on. I'll throw the creeping Charlie on top of that, and it creates a net so that I can walk on top of those trees and branches and eventually put other stuff on top of there and eventually garden in it. That's what I do with most of our abundant weeds that are just, let's say, that really grow like crazy. Let's say grass that invades the garden, creeping Charlie that invades the garden, buckthorn that invades the forest. I'll just harvest it all and I'll use it somewhere where I'm trying to build the soil. Got some lemon balm up here by the garlic. And we've got some more just outside the garden fence here at the entrance. Really great to have this time of year. Lemon balm, the mint, the creeping Charlie, the dandelion, the stinging nettle, and so much else. Oregano is up really nicely as well. And then in the little spaces where there isn't any oregano growing, where I had a whole bunch of grass in there, I pulled it all up, some grass that was invading the garden, and I transplanted all of this kale in here. So we got some curly kale here, some purple curly kale. We got another type of kale here. There might be stuff here that might be turnip or other stuff. Sometimes when I collect seeds, I don't pay attention necessarily, and they all look the same. The turnip and the rutabaga and the kohlrabi and the kale, they all have the same cabbage. They all have similar looking seeds. Anyway, but all these plants, the kale, etc., they can handle some pretty strong frost, and so I've transplanted them in already. Lettuce too, of course. Lettuce, carrots, they can all handle that. So all this stuff's been transplanted in. Next, probably tomorrow, I'll be transplanting some beets into here, and also direct sowing beets to see how I want to compare how the two different kinds do. I want to make a final comparison this year because maybe in the future I'm just going to direct sow my beets. Got some more kale over here along the fence and some more lettuce growing. Second cabbage that survived the winter. This is some red Calabos cabbage. Really, really delicious cabbage. If I can get some seeds off of this little guy, I'll be really happy. In case you're wondering, when I harvest my cabbage, I leave the roots and the lower stem in the ground so that it can continue growing, maybe give us some mini cabbages, and then grow through the winter like this. So this is one of those, and the green one earlier was one of those as well. On the northernmost edge of our garden, all of our peas are up. All these trellises have peas at their base, and they're doing real well. A whole bunch of rows of peas, along with some stinging nettle, some looks like kale here, or no, I'm pretty sure that's actually mustard. This is all mustard. Lots of mustard here, which is great. I love mustard flowers and I love mustard leaves. Not to mention the seeds. So the peas are all doing good. However, one challenge we have with our peas is somehow one year some more of this sow thistle got into here. And so I've got to keep an eye on the sow thistle. They don't bother the peas as much. It doesn't bother the peas as much because they grow so tall. Although the sow thistle here growing beside the peas is so happy growing beside the peas. I've seen it grow to 4 meters tall. Like we're talking 12, 13, 14 feet tall. Of course, if I get this sow thistle small, it's better. Now, I didn't get the root there, however. These peas are up. Peas are all up, they're doing good. The sow thistle's doing good too. Anyway, see how that does. Here's another perennial that's up that I use sort of as an insect repellent, wormwood. Still don't know how to use that for medicinal purposes, but anyways, one day I'll learn. More second-year parsley here, and a whole ton of peppermint that's just starting to come up. Love the peppermint. Got some asparagus coming up here. A little one, bigger one here. Little one here. If you've never heard of hascaps, I highly recommend them. They're a bit like blueberries, except that they're long and narrow. They're delicious, and they're the first fruit that we get in the spring. They're all in there. The blooms are just coming out now. They're in the honeysuckle family, and so they grow really, really well. These are some of our plum trees. We have different varieties that are all in bloom, let's say at different stages. This is another variety. This is the native variety here, which is at the latest stage of bloom. And this is another variety over here. We have a whole bunch. We've got maybe 8 or 10 plum trees. The comfrey is up everywhere as well. These plants get gigantic, and it's going to be about 30 times bigger than it is right now. Probably going to divide a couple of our plants this year. We've got about I think it's 10 or 12 of these clumps. I'd like to divide a bunch and put some roots, plant comfrey at the base of all of our fruit trees. What I have started to put at the base of many of our trees in the last 3 years, while I've been waiting for our comfrey to get big enough to be able to divide it. I did divide one last year for a video, but I sold those roots. Anyway, what I have been putting in while waiting for those comfrey at the base of our trees are either walking onions like this one, these Egyptian walking onions, or even just regular onions. And I just let them perennialize. I just let them stay there. They divide. They get more and more onions over the years, and those onions help the trees as well. They repel pests and stuff like that. And of course, yarrow. I've been putting yarrow at the base of all my trees as well. And you can cut the yarrow leaves down like you would comfrey and use it as mulch like you would comfrey. And it will give the tree roots lots and lots of nutrients. And of course, you could do that with the onions, although I prefer to take the onions in and eat them if I do cut some. And of course, I will take yarrow in and eat them, but I eat it as well. Not eat it, but make tea out of it, because it's very healthy that way. This is a little ginkgo biloba that we put in last year. Living fossil. This is a plant that always surprises me. This is cardoon. It's in the thistle family, so I guess I shouldn't be too surprised. It gets these gigantic tropical looking leaves, and it blooms with these flowers that are sometimes the size almost of oranges, sometimes almost the size of grapefruit, the flowers. And once again, just like all the other thistles, the stems are edible, and maybe even the leaves, I would think, if the stems are edible. But beautiful, beautiful plant, cardoon, and I'm surprised it survives the winter here. This has been here for 4 years at least, and it's one of the first plants that appears. I'm not sowing pumpkins in this pumpkin patch, and likely not until the first or second week of June. I might sow a few Queensland blue seeds in here as trap plants for the bugs, for the cucumber beetles and so on, so that the birds come and eat them and they think, well, it's all done. And then afterwards in June, I'll plant all our varieties. But the ones that do best against those beetles are the are the butternut type squash. Let's have a look and see what's going on in the greenhouse. Once again, everything's a little bit later here because there are things I just had to wait because it was too cold in the greenhouse. So let's have a look and see. Cardoon sprouts, Nigella sprouts, flowering tobacco. I think this is either broccoli or cauliflower. Some basket willow, one of them that has some kale in there with it. More flowering tobacco, and here we have either some broccoli or some cauliflower again. Here's some tomatoes I was testing. Here's some garden huckleberry sprouting. More cardoon, I love that plant. Here's some late parsley. I've got others that's more further along. Here's some of our barley, which is one of our first grains that sprouted. Here's some gaillardia that's just starting to get sprouted. Here's some beets. I've got beets at different stages as well. And here are all our tomatoes, just getting started. They just sprouted maybe a week ago or so. They're just little right now. All these are tomatoes. Here I've got some sunflowers, and here's some more. These are some tomatoes, some coyote tomatoes, some Chiapas tomatoes, and some yellow pear tomatoes that I tested because they were tomatoes that were frozen solid here in the greenhouse in December that I harvested, not to eat, but to see if the seeds would still be viable. And well, look at them. They were. Here you got some plantain growing and some wild bergamot. It was May 5th that I sowed all of our grains. So they're not up yet. Just sorghum and stuff like that. They're not up yet. Millet. It'll be up soon enough though. Here's some more barley that's already sprouted. And here's some more buckwheat. Some parsley a little bit further along and some homegrown onion seed. This is some of our cabbage that I'm going to start hardening off tomorrow. I've got some already hardening off outside. And then here's some calendula and some marigolds and some more marigolds at different stages and some more calendula and yet more marigolds. And here's some more sorghum that I'm just waiting to start to see sprouting. It's just been a few days. And out here we're hardening off some dill, some cabbage, some beets, some more kale, even though we got a whole bunch in the garden, some rutabaga and turnip, basket willow, red and yellow basket willow. Some carrots I've been testing. All those carrots that you saw in the garden around the tomatoes, they're all from homegrown seed, and these are from homegrown seed as well. I want to see if I was successful in getting the carrots to flower at a different time from the wild carrots so that they don't cross-pollinate with the wild carrots, because it's almost impossible if they're flowering at the same time to prevent that, because wild carrots are everywhere here. Now you can eat wild carrots. They taste like carrots, but the texture is completely different. They're kind of chewy. They take a lot of work to chew on and stuff like that. Not as crunchy and juicy and sweet as regular carrots, but they, you know, in a pinch you can eat wild carrot root. And anyway, we'll see. We'll see if we got some nice crunchy juicy carrots here. The other ones you saw in the garden with the tomatoes were also these homegrown seeds. Whereas the ones planted with the onions, those were seed packets. Some more lettuce in here that hasn't been transplanted yet. You may recall the video I did in January when I winter sowed a whole bunch of native wildflowers. Well, they're mostly up. I sowed about 300 pots worth, and I'd say at least 50% of them have sprouted and are growing. Native wildflowers can be sometimes very slow to sprout, and so I'm really happy to see that we've got at least half of the species that have sprouted, if not more. I haven't counted them. I have marked them down. I've written them down. I've identified which ones are growing and so on a spreadsheet. But I'm really happy about this. Now, I was talking to you about microclimates. This garden right here, it's right up against the house, a south-facing wall. The front of the house, it's south-facing. And it's way further along than all the other gardens. Let's have a look. The brick getting all that sunlight from the south just collects all that heat, and then of course lets that heat go at night, and it just basically keeps this area, it's what's called a heat trap. And so this garden always starts a lot earlier than all the rest. This is more like a little flower garden that we have, but we grow foods in here. All this stuff here that looks like grass, this is all garlic chives going crazy in here. You have to be careful because there's also some daffodils here, and we wouldn't want to harvest daffodil leaves with the garlic chives because daffodil leaves you cannot eat. They're toxic. We've also got some hollyhocks growing in here. Hollyhock flowers are edible and very, very delicious. And we've got some poppies that have started, some really large poppy plants, and some Monarda didima, some scarlet bee balm growing in here. I look forward to seeing that. I love that flower. And then on the other side, we've got some thyme, some lavender, some, and one of my favorite plants here. This is prairie smoke, which is just getting into bloom. And another one of my favorite plants, here's some western prickly pear cactus. And we've got some Ontario prickly pear hiding around here somewhere. I have to be careful. I don't cut myself, or I don't, here's another western prickly pear. Then here's the Ontario native prickly pear right here. It's got a darker green color. Got a few more of those prickly pears. One right here, third one right here, and then here's a fourth one. Looks like it's not doing too well. I think maybe it might need some water. Wow, cactus that's suffering from dehydration looks like. Maybe I'm gonna give this little guy some water. There we go, give him some good amount of water there. Got walking onions everywhere. Here we have some celery in its second year. I planted this last year and it didn't really do much, and I figured, well, I guess it's not going to do much, but I can see that maybe celery is just something that takes 2 seasons in a cold climate to do something that you can actually use. It's up quite a bit here, which is nice. And we'll be able to eat some of this as it gets a little bit bigger, and it's most likely going to give us some seed this year, and then of course the seed will be adapted to these conditions, and maybe those seeds might grow faster. We'll see. Got 2 types of celery here, a green type and a purple type that I got from La Société des Plantes in Kamouraska, Quebec, which is zone 4. So if they can grow it in zone 4, I can certainly grow it here in zone 5B, 6A. Our several serviceberry bushes are also nicely along. They're another one that gives us fruit real early. We get lots and lots of fruit by the end of June off of these serviceberries. We planted onions and carrots again in this kitchen compost garden. Basically stopped putting compost in it at the end of February, beginning of March, and then can't remember when I put these in, but sometime in April. Got all this mesh on top of the onions and the carrots, because if we didn't put that mesh here, the cats might use this as their luxury kitty litter. But once the carrots are up a bit, I'll be able to take that stuff off. But right now the cats don't go in there because this stuff just makes it too inconvenient for them. They can't dig. Got some more lettuce here. I started about a week and a half ago, so we can have lettuce a bit later when all the other stuff is all done, which is really nice. And it's just sitting here on top of all these leaves, which is where we plant our watermelons. So these leaves are just helping these gardens bide their time so the weeds don't come up. Here's my first ever magnolia tree. Wow, we had a magnolia tree at our house where we lived when I was a kid, and I just loved it. Very, a very Carolinian zone tree. Love the tree. This is a little tiny one. We'll see how it does. Put this in last year, and I put it in with some walking onions here, which are doing really well. They're as big as the tree. Tree's suffering a little, but it's got some buds. It was a rough winter this year, and this was just a tiny little tree. The onions are keeping it company. It looks like I'm going to be able to get some kale seed as well this year. This kale came back, survived the winter. In the re-uploaded video from this past week that I showed you, I was transplanting sorghum into these curved chinampa gardens here. I was telling you there was some poison ivy. Well, it's still here, and let me show you what the fruit looks like, because I told you about the fruit. The fruit was so, let's say, low growing that the deer missed it. There was 4 feet of snow back here this past winter. Some marsh marigolds growing in here too. But here is the poison ivy fruit that the deer love to eat. So the deer eat this fruit in the winter. It's one of the few fruit that they can get through the winter, because of course it's low down to the ground, most of it. I guess some of it can climb up trees. There's some poison ivy that grows like a vine, but this stuff was hidden under the snow, so it's still here. Poison ivy berries, don't eat them. And actually look at you see those little tiny red leaves there surrounding it? Those are all poison ivy stems just coming out. So I got to be careful this time of year. If I went and picked all this grass here, I might pull at these stems, break these stems, and then I got poison ivy juice on me. Whoop, there was one that was right below my hand. Oh, it's not broken. I don't think I got any sap from that. I'll make sure I give my hand a good wash with some good soap, as if I was washing off motor oil, just in case. I could use jewelweed to wash my hands with, but as you can see here, it's only just starting to come up. It's only sprouting. This is what a jewelweed sprout looks like. I came inside to wash my hands and almost forgot to show you some of our plants that are here indoors. So up here we got the loofah. It's doing really well, and I've got some more in the basement, in a window in the basement that I had on top of a heat mat as well. They don't have the heat mats there. There's a heat mat here, but it's not plugged in anymore. They're growing now, so I figured no, it's enough. But I mean, look at these. Some of these loofahs are just they're getting way too long. And then look at these peppers as well. You see, they're really big. They're ready to go outside. However, I'm hoping to put these into the greenhouse tomorrow. So yeah, adapting to the weather, changing weather patterns is important. But you know, over time you realize how long things take to grow. And there's plenty of season for everything here to grow, even though that we're late. And so I'm not worried. We're going to get an excellent harvest. And you know, every year is different. Some years, depending on the conditions, you get more of some things and then less of others. But then in the following year, you'll get more of those others and less of the first things. Different conditions give you different things. And so some years we get lots of some things and others lots of others. And that's kind of nice to get that kind of variety. It's healthy. It's healthy to change your eating habits and to eat different things through the seasons and also through the years. And then here's my basket of seeds that I'll be choosing from over the next several days to sow in the greenhouse. Our watermelons and okra, Malabar spinach, and all sorts of other stuff that we plant at the same time as them. And then around, let's say, May 19th, May 20th, something like that, I'll be sowing the corn outside. About a week later, week and a half later, I'll be sowing the beans, the first days of June, and then after that, the squash. I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope you learned something from it and you found it useful. If you liked it, then please give it the thumbs up and share it with your friends. And if you have a question or comment, don't forget to leave it. I like to answer all your questions and respond to all your comments. And I learn a lot from pretty well all the comments that you give me. They're all great. They create community. They create an exchange of knowledge. It's just nice because I appreciate having you here with me, sharing these videos with you. Thank you very much for being here with me. Thank you for watching. Have a wonderful week, and we will see you next time.